On the day of my 18th birthday celebration, my parents brought along their real daughter. I knew better than anyone that from this moment on, all the honors that once belonged to me would vanish like smoke. When my father held her hand and led her to the podium, announcing to everyone that she was the real daughter of the Zhou family, I could feel all the scornful and mocking gazes fall upon me. But just as I was about to leave, someone stopped me. The girl who had suffered in my place for 18 years blocked my path. She extended her hand to me, her smile radiant. "Isn't today both of our birthdays? Come on, let's cut the cake together." Those hands pulled me out of the darkness, bringing a long-lost light back into my world. From the age of 13, I had known that I wasn't my parents' biological daughter. They hadn't hidden this fact from me. Instead, on an ordinary day, sitting on the living room sofa, they told me. My father said they wouldn't abandon me, but they also wouldn't give up searching for their biological daughter. My mother said that I would always be their child and that I didn't need to worry about being thrown out. But from that day on, I lived in constant fear, as if balancing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for this ticking time bomb to eventually strike me down. I hadn't expected that it would be on my 18th birthday. To be honest, the moment I saw Zhou Wanning standing at the doorway, I knew she was the real daughter of the Zhou family. Even though she wore no makeup and was dressed simply in a t-shirt and jeans, her face bore such a striking resemblance to my mother's. I stood at the center of the crowd, at a complete loss. It wasn't until my father looked at me that I realized just how stiff my expression must have been. A daughter of the Zhou family shouldn't look like this. I was supposed to be magnanimous and graceful, to know when to advance and retreat, to understand proper etiquette. So I quickly adjusted myself, smiling as I told those around me that I had something to take care of. Dressed in a white gown and wearing a crown, I walked step by step toward my parents. Zhou Wanning stood beside them, looking at me with an expression filled with curiosity and confusion. In families like ours, it was common to hear about illegitimate children. I had seen plenty of people have messy, public fights over such matters. I had even witnessed battles over inheritance that left people bloodied and battered, but none of that had anything to do with me. Because I had no blood ties with the Zhou family to begin with a single word from Zhou Wanning, I would be expected to hand over everything willingly. "Father," I greeted my father, who looked me up and down, nodding slightly before frowning. "Why are you wearing that necklace?" "It's out of season." My heart sank, but I kept my face expressionless. "I apologize, father. It took longer than expected to get ready today, and I didn't notice. I'll change it out in a moment." He shook his head. "No need, you're already wearing it, so just leave it on, otherwise, we'll look overly petty." I didn't say anything, only nodding obediently. Next to him, my mother held Zhou Wanning's hand with a gentle smile on her face. "Ji Yun, this is Wanning, your younger sister." Standing beside her, Zhou Wanning flashed a radiant smile amid my unease. She extended her hand to me without a trace of hesitation. "Hi, I'm Zhou Wanning." Those hands weren't the hands of someone pampered and sheltered. There were calluses on them, though I didn't know from what kind of work had left them there. I thought about how, for these 18 years, she must have led a hard life, all of it, endured because of me. I reached out to shake her hand. "Hello, I'm Zhou Ziyun." A long time later, when Zhou Wanning talked about this day, she said she had never seen a girl who looked more like a Barbie doll than I did. She said that the moment she saw me, she just knew she liked me. The evening banquet officially began. Originally, I was supposed to go on stage and give a speech, but now that Zhou Wanning was here, it was only natural for her to take my place. My father led her onto the stage, introducing her to everyone as the daughter they had lost for 18 years. In that moment, standing below the stage, I felt like Cinderella after midnight. Zhou Wanning stood there smiling, completely at ease. I listened to the whispers around me, forcing back the tears in my eyes, and turned, intending to leave this scene that left me feeling so helpless, but Zhou Wanning called out to me. She walked down from the stage and came straight to my side, her face alight with a bright smile. "Sister, where are you going? Isn't it time to cut the cake?" I admit, I am a selfish person. I didn't want anyone disrupting the life that should have been smooth for me. Yet, when it came to Zhou Wanning, I couldn't even bring myself to think like the villainess in all those stories. She was so warm, so radiant, as if under some kind of enchantment. I extended my hand towards her. Father hadn't explicitly said that I wasn't a child of the Zhou family, but most of the people present were sharp enough to piece it together. After the banquet ended, I removed my makeup and sat on the sofa with Zhou Wanning. Our parents sat across from us. When they looked at Zhou Wanning, their eyes were filled with the joy of a long-lost reunion. "Wanning, it must have been hard on you all these years. I heard that things haven't been easy for you. Mother held her hand, and as she spoke, her eyes sparkled with tears. I sat beside Zhou Wanning, feeling my face burning with embarrassment, unable to stop myself from clenching my hands tightly. She would surely pour out her grievances, talking about how much suffering she had endured over the years. Then she and Mother would break down in each other's arms, crying together, and I would become the sinner who had occupied her rightful identity for so many years. Hard? It wasn't hard at all. I looked at Zhou Wanning abruptly. Her face still held that same lovely smile. Those eyes, so similar to Mother's, were full of laughter. Although we didn't have much money, when Mom and Dad were alive, they never let me suffer. After they passed away, I lived with Grandma. She treated me very well too, and I was happy. Zhou Wanning's voice was light, as if those years held no bitterness or regret for her. She held Mother's hand, her voice gentle. The incident of switching the babies back then was an accident. You and Dad don't need to blame yourselves. See, I'm back now. Mother wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, nodding fervently in agreement. Father told her that he had already arranged her transfer to my school. Starting tomorrow, she would be in my class. As he said this, he gave me a warning look. I quickly suppressed the sourness in my heart and smiled at him. I understand, Father. At bedtime, I had intended to give up my own bedroom for her. However, they had already prepared a room for Wanning, one larger and more luxurious than mine. It would be a lie to say I wasn't hurt by this, but what right did I have to feel sad? What I didn't expect was for Zhou Wanning to knock on my door. She stood there in her pajamas, hugging a pillow. When I opened the door, she seemed a bit awkward. I just got here, and I'm having trouble sleeping. Can I sleep with you? I froze. As the only daughter of the Zhou family, I had been raised to be independent from a young age and hadn't shared a bed with anyone for years. But I still nodded, overjoyed by my approval. Zhou Wanning scrambled into my bed. As expected from a wealthy family, even the bed is softer than mine. Hearing that made my heart ache even more. I'm sorry. If it weren't for me, all of this would have originally been yours. Zhou Wanning widened her eyes, looking at me in confusion. Why would you say that? She continued, this has nothing to do with you. It's not like you crawled over to my side to swap places with me. Besides, if you think about it, I've been the one enjoying your parents' love for the past decade or so. My biological parents had passed away in a plane crash 4 years ago. Unfortunately, I would never get to see what they looked like in this lifetime. After what Zhou Wanning said, a bit of curiosity stirred in me. I lay beside her and cautiously asked, what did they look like? Oh, they ran a small restaurant. Dad always said that as long as we did good deeds, heaven would reward us, so everyone in the town got along well with my parents. Mom was very beautiful. Even though she always complained that Dad lacked ambition, she was actually very good to him, ironing his clothes and polishing his shoes. When I was little, Dad would personally cook longevity noodles for my birthday each year, and Mom would buy me a doll to hug while I slept. In her tone, there was a hint of nostalgia, and her expression softened, her voice brimming with joy. I could tell, she truly loved them, perhaps because of Zhou Wanning. That night I dreamed of my birth parents, whom I had never met. The high school I attended was a private school, where every student came from an extraordinary background and had outstanding academic achievements. In a way, we were being groomed as heirs. From the very first day Zhou Wanning arrived at school, she caused quite a stir. I watched her stand on the podium, introducing herself. Though her clothes were simple, the light in her eyes was something that couldn't be hidden, no matter what. Zhou Ziyun, I think you're about to be abandoned by the Zhou family, might as well scram now. The discordant voice came from Lin Yang, who sat in front of me. She had always disliked me, though it was really only because the boy she liked had confessed to me, and I had turned him down. I listened to the unpleasant words coming out of her mouth, but my expression didn't change in the slightest. My father had told me that those who slandered me only did so because they couldn't match my excellence, so, don't bother with them. Don't lower yourself to their level. Why are you still pretending to be a rich young lady? Don't think we don't know you're a fake. Sooner or later, Lu Jiyuan is going to break off the engagement with you. Lin Yang rolled her eyes brazenly. I clenched the hem of my shirt, trying to steady my emotions. Lu Jiyuan and I had been engaged since childhood, but to be honest, the one who was supposed to be engaged to him was the Zhou family's real daughter. Now that Zhou Wanning was back, perhaps, as Lin Yang said, I should return what wasn't mine. Where did this fat pig come from, grunting and stinking up the place? I looked up and saw Zhou Wanning sitting down beside me, her brows furrowed. Lin Yang's expression was unpleasant as she pointed a finger at Zhou Wanning's nose. You. A girl from a small town dares to insult me? Zhou Wanning leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I'm insulting you. So what? Go ahead, report me if you dare. Naturally, Lin Yang didn't dare say anything more. Arrogant as she was, the Lin family's business was still far behind the Zhou family's. I tugged at Zhou Wanning's sleeve, signaling her not to escalate the situation. She glanced at me and fell silent, but as soon as class started, Zhou Wanning slumped onto the desk and promptly fell asleep. I was used to being the well-behaved student, so seeing her like this made me feel a bit uneasy. I reached out and tugged at her sleeve. What is it? Zhou Wanning opened her eyes and looked at me. You're sleeping in class. Aren't you going to listen to the lecture? She shrugged indifferently and smirked. Even if I listened, I wouldn't understand. By the way, why didn't you fight back just now? Father says that as the daughter of the Zhou family, I should be polite and well-mannered. Zhou Wanning frowned and replied, taking insults without fighting back. That's called weakness. I wanted to say something more, but seeing Zhou Wanning already covering her head with her jacket, looking like she couldn't care less about the world, I decided to keep my mouth shut. Just as the bell rang to signal the end of class, I saw Lu Jiyuan standing by the classroom door. As always, he looked calm and gentle. I liked Lu Jiyuan. After all, it was hard for anyone not to like him. He stood at the doorway of the classroom, looking at me with a gaze overflowing with warmth. Why are you here? I walked up to Lu Jiyuan and looked up at him. He took a small box out of his pocket and handed it to me. I couldn't get away yesterday and missed your coming-of-age ceremony. This is a gift to make up for it. Lu Jiyuan had never missed any of my birthdays. I carefully tucked the gift away and smiled at him. Thank you. For so many years, I had never expressed my feelings for Lu Jiyuan, but I felt we both understood, without the need for words. He reached out and gently patted my head. I heard something happened at the ceremony yesterday. He'd asked about it, just as I'd expected. I didn't know how Lu Jiyuan truly thought of me, but I didn't want to keep anything from him. Even if the price of telling the truth meant losing him, I took a deep breath, nodded, and then recounted the whole story to him. When I finished speaking, Lu Jiyuan stood silently in front of me, not saying a word for a long time. My heart twisted with anxiety at his silence until he finally chuckled. Why do you look so scared? What are you afraid of, Ji? Behind Lu Jiyuan stretched an endless blue sky. He looked at me, his smile gentle and warm. You are Zhou Ziyun, no matter when, you'll always be my Ji. My face stayed flushed until all the morning classes ended. Zhou Wanning said I looked like an overripe watermelon. However, before the lunch break, I ran into the last person I wanted to see. Zhou Ziyun, long time no see. Jiang Jin. I instinctively took a step back, placing Zhou Wanning behind me. As I looked at the boy in front of me, he had a lazy demeanor, with visible scars on his face. Jiang Jin was infamous in the school as a troublemaker. Unlike people like Lin Yang, who only talked big, Jiang Jin's anger and ruthlessness were frighteningly real for someone our age. The feud between us went back a year, when I reported his involvement in a school fight to Uncle Jiang. From that moment on, Jiang Jin was convinced that I couldn't stand to see him living a good life. Jiang Jin jumped down from the wall and walked up to me. I heard there was quite a stir while I was away. His gaze slid past me and landed on Zhou Wanning. So this is your beloved little sister? The real daughter of the Zhou family? I said nothing, just stared at him intently. Why are you looking at me like that, Zhou Ziyun? I'm not going to eat you. Jiang Jin leaned in closer, blinking as he spoke. Relax, I won't do anything to you. As long as you're still the Zhou family's daughter, I can't touch you. So, you'd better pray that the Zhou family never abandons you. Jiang Jin's words clung to me like a curse, but he'd already turned and walked off, hands in his pockets. Who was that? Zhou Wanning watched Jiang Jin's departing figure, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen. I let out a sigh and said, the young master of the Jiang family, better not cross him. If he decides to go after you, you'll regret it one way or another. Zhou Wanning nodded thoughtfully, and a moment later, her usual smile returned. Let's go, sister, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. She held my hand, her palm warm, warmer even than the spring days of April. In the end, Lu Jiyuan still appeared in my living room. With his parents by his side, when he saw me, Lu Jiyuan shrugged helplessly and gave me a reassuring look. I sat down beside my parents along with Zhou Wanning. Uncle Lu's gaze fell on Zhou Wanning, his expression warm. So this is Wanning? You really look like your mother. Zhou Wanning smiled and nodded, staying silent. They talked about business matters, topics we had no place to interrupt. I sat there, bored and lost in thought, until I noticed a peeled mandarin orange placed in front of me. Even the thin white fibers on it had been carefully removed. I looked up and met Lu Jiyuan's gentle gaze. All the background noise faded with his gesture, and I took the orange with a flushed face, murmuring a soft thank you. "These two really seem close," Uncle Lu remarked with a smile, though his gaze shifted pointedly toward Zhou Wanning. "It's just that back when we arranged the engagement, it was with the daughter of the Zhou family. Now," he left his sentence unfinished, but my heart clenched. I looked at Lu Jiyuan. He clearly hadn't expected Uncle Lu to suddenly cause trouble, and his face darkened with anger. My father didn't respond right away, but Zhou Wanning, seated next to me, slammed her hand on the table and stood up. "What's that supposed to mean? You're not saying you want me to be engaged to him, are you?" Her outburst drew everyone's attention. My mother reached out to tug her back. "Wanning, you can't speak so loudly, it's very impolite." Zhou Wanning's eyes widened defiantly. She clearly had no intention of backing down. "Impolite? You're arranging a marriage for me, and I'm still supposed to be polite." She looked at my father, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "I came back because you told me you're my biological parents, but that doesn't mean I'll let you control my life. I won't get engaged, no matter who the person is." "Me too." Lu Jiyuan's voice was firm, a rare seriousness in his tone. He looked at Uncle Lu with an uncharacteristically steely gaze. No longer the usual gentle son. "Gigi and I grew up together. I care about her deeply, not just anyone can be my wife." This was the first time Lu Jiyuan had openly declared his feelings for me. Even though I knew it was the wrong moment, my heart couldn't help but race. Now, everyone's gaze shifted to me. My father looked at me, his eyes glinting coldly. "Ji Yun, what do you think?" I knew what he wanted me to say, just as he had always taught me. I was supposed to be sensible, to understand propriety, to secure the greatest benefit for the family. I wasn't Zhou Ziyun, I was a member of the Zhou family, but this time, I didn't want to say every word according to his wishes. I looked at Zhou Wanning. She gazed back at me, her eyes filled with encouragement. "I don't want to." This was the first time I had ever defied my parents' decision. In the end, this matter still didn't come to a conclusion. The four adults unanimously decided to discuss it later. As Lu Jiyuan passed by me before leaving, he gave my hand a squeeze. I knew that he was telling me he wouldn't compromise, neither would I. After they left, I turned around and met my father's furious gaze. "Kneel." I walked slowly to the front of the sofa and knelt before my father. This was the punishment I had to endure every time I made a mistake, but I hadn't done this since I was 10 years old. Zhou Wanning, seeing how practiced I was at kneeling on the ground, looked at me in shock. "What are you doing, Wanning? Your sister made a mistake, so she deserves to be punished." My mother tried to make her understand. But Zhou Wanning only looked more incredulous. "Made a mistake? What did she do wrong? Even if she did do something wrong, you still shouldn't treat her like this. She is your daughter, but she is even more herself." Zhou Wanning moved to pull me up from the ground, but I only shook my head at her. "Wanning, don't pull me, this is a punishment I deserve." "Deserve? That's nonsense. Zhou Ziyun, have you lost your mind? They don't have the right to treat you like this. She eats my food and lives in my house. I absolutely have the right to treat her this way." My father shook the cane in his hand through the air, clearly seething with anger. Zhou Wanning stood in front of me, undeterred. "She eats your food and lives in your house, because she's your daughter. These are things you gave her, not things she demanded. Besides, she has done a lot too. She is outstanding and kind, one of the best students at school, someone you boast about as your pride. This is an exchange of benefits between you and her, not a reason for you to hit or punish her." Kneeling behind Zhou Wanning, I looked at her back, realizing for the first time how tall she seemed. She turned to look at me, her gaze resolute. "Zhou Ziyun, do you want to leave with me?" "Leave?" She gritted her teeth and nodded. "Yes, leave this place. I used to think my parents, who searched for me for so long, must be good people. Now I realize just how wrong I was. They didn't really want to see me, they just wanted another bargaining chip, another puppet to manipulate." Her face flushed with anger, her eyes blazing, shining like stars in the darkness. "Zhou Ziyun, I'm leaving this place, what about you? Will you come with me?" In that moment, countless fragments flashed through my mind. Back in my childhood, when I was still naive, I didn't understand why other children could build sandcastles, While I had to practice piano for 3 hours in the music room, I didn't understand why I had to learn so many things, why I couldn't have ice cream and barbecue, couldn't eat fries or burgers, and was only allowed fruit and salad. I didn't understand why I had to walk with my chin up, why I had to smile no matter where I was, why my clothes always had to be the latest season's fashion, or why I had to study deep into the night. All those things that looked glamorous to outsiders were never things I wanted. I liked climbing trees to collect bird eggs, laughing loudly and freely on the streets, pointing at people who scolded me and shouting back at them, listening to rock music, and cutting my hair short. I didn't like the person I had become, but I also couldn't find the person I used to be anymore. But now, it felt like I had found her again. It was Zhou Wanning. She brought the old me back, right in front of me. Once again, I placed my hand in hers. All right, this was an unplanned escape. Zhou Wanning held my hand, pulling me along as we sprinted all the way to the entrance of the neighborhood. I was panting, still a bit disoriented by everything. In this moment, Zhou Wanning was my anchor. Wanning, where are we going? Under the night sky. Her face was as resolute as ever. Her skin, not exactly fair, had a healthy glow. She looked back at me, and the street lamp behind her cast a halo around her, like some divine radiance. To my hometown, haven't you always been curious about my past life? She didn't care at all about the sweat on her forehead. After a quick swipe, she took my hand again. Honestly, I didn't think you'd agree to this. Zhou Zhiyun, what were you thinking? I didn't really know what I was thinking either. Holding Zhou Wanning's hand, I felt its strength, less soft than mine but filled with resilience. Maybe it was because your eyes were so bright in that moment. Zhou Wanning didn't understand what I meant, but she smiled at me anyway. I had expected all sorts of obstacles in our departure, but I never thought it would go this smoothly. When we finally boarded the high-speed train, my heart was still pounding wildly. The scenery outside the train flew past in a blur, and soon I could see the vast, endless sea. Did you get any messages from Mom and Dad? Zhou Wanning shook her head. They probably just think we're joking around. They're probably waiting for us to come crawling back in shame. She smirked, looking entirely unconcerned. I used to think that a life with money would be comfortable. Never thought it'd be this bizarre. Zhou Zhiyun, I'm actually starting to thank you. If it weren't for you, the one living that kind of life would have been me. Her words made me laugh. After we got off the train, the air was filled with the scent of the ocean, and the wind that blew against my face was damp. I couldn't help but take a deep breath. Zhou Wanning seemed to have everything planned out. Let's go. I'll take you to get some good food. My bank card had already been cut off by my parents, but luckily, Zhou Wanning had her own little stash of money. Here, I saw a more genuine side of her. It seemed like Zhou Wanning knew everyone. No matter where we went, people would call out to her, and the smile on her face never faded. We wandered through the alleys, eventually stopping at her home. Zhou Wanning pulled a small key from behind her phone case. She winked at me. Welcome to the place where I grew up. As she opened the door, my heart pounded wildly. This wasn't just the place where she grew up. It was also where my biological parents, whom I had missed the chance to know, had once lived. The house wasn't big, and it was clear that no one had lived here for a while. Zhou Wanning was busy opening the windows to let in some fresh air, while my gaze fell on the family photo on the table. It was a young Zhou Wanning, along with a middle-aged couple. Those were my parents. I looked at the smile on the woman's face in the photo. It was exactly like Zhou Wanning's. Sometimes, I felt as if even genes could be altered somehow. Take Zhou Wanning, for example. Other than her appearance, she had nothing in common with her Zhou family parents. This was taken when I was 5, Zhou Wanning said, appearing behind me without my noticing. She picked up the photo and gently wiped the dust from it. Look, doesn't she look a lot like you, does she? Perhaps, I want to go see them. By the time Zhou Wanning and I arrived at the cemetery, it was already nighttime. She led me straight to their graves with practiced ease, then plopped herself down in front of the tombstone. I felt a bit lost and unsure of what to do, but in the end, it was Zhou Wanning who pulled me down to sit beside her. Mom, Dad, I found your real daughter. Funny enough, she doesn't look like Dad at all. Good thing she doesn't, or she wouldn't be nearly as pretty as she is now. Zhou Wanning's tone was playful, but her eyes were filled with deep sorrow. I saw the glimmer of tears in her eyes, but Zhou Wanning didn't seem to mind. She just wiped her eyes and then gave my shoulder a teasing pat. Come on, it's your first time meeting your real parents. Don't you have anything to say? I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. When I was little, I was like every other child, always wanting to tell my parents everything that happened at school. But no one wanted to listen. My father was always busy attending various meetings, and even when he was home, he moved quickly and seemed preoccupied. My mother was a glamorous lady adorned with expensive jewelry, constantly going to gatherings and afternoon teas. When she saw me, the only thing she ever asked about was my grades. Honestly, I spent more time with my tutor and the housekeeper than I did with them. As time went on, I didn't really know how to talk to people anymore. But seeing the encouraging look in Zhou Wanning's eyes, I couldn't bring myself to let her down. Mom, Dad, my name is Zhou Zhiyun. After struggling for a while, all I could manage was a simple introduction. Zhou Wanning clicked her tongue in dissatisfaction. What are you even saying? Here, let me do the talking. Mom, Dad, don't mind that Zhou Zhiyun doesn't know how to speak. She's actually amazing and super talented, way better than me. Anyway, she's been the top of her class every year. She's beautiful, she's always soft-spoken. I've never seen her get angry at anyone. Oh, and she plays the piano, she paints, she dances. She's basically a jack of all trades. If you were still alive, I'm sure you'd be so proud of her. I stared blankly at Zhou Wanning's animated profile, feeling a deep ache in my heart. Proud of me? No one had ever been proud of me. They only thought that being the top student was what I was supposed to do, and only when my grades slipped did I get scolded in disappointment. They believed that I was born to be exceptional, because I was the daughter of the Zhou family, their child. With so many eyes watching me, I was expected to be this flawless, perfect person. No one had ever told me they were proud of me, huh? Why are you crying? Zhou Wanning looked at me in surprise. I reached up to touch my face and realized it was damp with tears. Yeah, why was I crying? I didn't know either. I shook my head and forced a smile. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm just too happy. Are you silly or what? Who cries when they're happy? Zhou Wanning stood up and brushed off her pants. Let's go, little crybaby. Big sister will take you to dinner. I'm the big sister. Humph. We were born on the same day. Who knows who's really older? I walked alongside Zhou Wanning, watching her hop along with a bounce in her step. Somehow, it felt like maybe this wasn't so bad after all. But I had underestimated my parents, or rather, my value to them. It was a week later when people from the Zhou family showed up at my door. My parents hadn't come to see me personally. Instead, they had sent a group of men who blocked my doorway. At the time, Zhou Wanning had gone downstairs to buy breakfast for me. Seeing the tall, strong men at my door, I knew there was no chance of escape. What are you here for? Master and Madam instructed us to bring you back. I cautiously took a step back. What about Wanning? They only told us to take you. I understood what my father meant. Zhou Wanning was being abandoned. She was too independent, too resistant to control, traits that did not align with their idea of a good daughter. But I was different. I had grown up in that environment. Compromise and suppressing my true nature were things I had learned from birth. They believed that I would go back, and they thought everything would return to the way it was supposed to be. But they had never really understood me. Alright, but I need to tell Wanning. Let me leave a note for her. You can wait outside. They exchanged glances, a hint of hesitation in their eyes. I forced a casual smile. This is a fifth-floor apartment with only one exit. Where could I possibly escape to? Well, alright, but please make it quick, miss. I nodded and closed the door. My palms were sweating. This was the boldest thing I had ever attempted. I rushed to the bedroom, opened the window, and looked down at the street below, trying to steady myself. It was now or never. I imitated what I'd seen in TV dramas, pulling out all the bed sheets and covers, tying them together in knots, and linking them into a makeshift rope. When it looked long enough, I secured one end to the window frame and tossed the rest out. There was already knocking at the door. I knew I didn't have much time left. Looking down from the fifth floor made my heart pound with fear, but I couldn't back down now. All this time, it had always been Zhou Wanning leading me forward. This time, I wanted to make a decision for myself. I gripped the sheets tightly and began to lower myself down, moving as fast as I could. I needed to reach Wanning before they figured out what was happening, so we could escape together. The sheets weren't long enough, and when I was still a short distance from the ground, I had to let go and jump. Pain shot through my ankle upon landing, but I didn't stop. Amidst the shocked stares of onlookers, I sprinted straight into the breakfast shop. Zhou Zhiyun? What are you doing? Filming Mission Impossible? Zhou Wanning held a meat bun in her mouth and wore flip-flops on her feet. I grabbed her and started running. They've found us. No time to explain. Run, wait. My shoes. I endured the pain in my ankle and ran all the way to another street. Pulling Zhou Wanning along, we hid among the crowd. While waiting for the traffic light to change, I finally got a chance to catch my breath. Zhou Wanning, it's not safe here anymore. I didn't get a chance to finish before someone forced me into a car. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Zhou Wanning's mouth open in shock and her outstretched hand. It was over. In the end, I had still failed. I woke up in a shabby little room, and to my surprise, sitting right in front of me was Jiang Jin. He was playing with a butterfly knife, and when he saw me awake, he even gave me a small smile. My hands and feet were tied together, and after struggling without success, I finally gave up. Jiang Jin, what do you want to do? He drove the butterfly knife into the table in front of him. I told you, once you left the Zhou family, it would be my time for revenge. The way Jiang Jin said this, it seemed as though there was some deep, unresolved hatred between us. I felt a bit helpless. Jiang Jin, if you're still holding a grudge about me telling your dad about your fights, I apologize. Stop playing games. Kidnapping can land you in prison. Jiang Jin's expression twisted instantly. He strode over to me, grabbing my hair with one hand. What the hell do you know? Because of you, Qiu Yu is dead. Qiu Yu? Who was that? The confusion in my eyes seemed to infuriate him even more. His eyes were bloodshot, with a faint shimmer of tears. See? You don't even know who Qiu Yu was. Zhou Ziyun, you're always so arrogant and oblivious. Do you even know why I got into that fight? You know nothing. I fought that person because he was Qiu Yu's brother. Ever since they were young, he had twisted ideas about her. Qiu Yu grew up under his control, all the way until she was 17. That day was the day we planned to run away together, but her brother found us. I had already defeated him. I thought we could finally be happy together. But because of you. Because of the call you made to that old man. Qiu Yu died. She died. Jiang Jin's words echoed in my mind. I watched him slump back into his chair, his figure now defeated. He lowered his head, speaking haltingly about his past with the girl named Qiu Yu. Everyone thought I had no future, but Qiu Yu, she never gave up on me. She would put medicine on my wounds, cook for me, comfort me, keep me company. Qiu Yu was such a good person, like an angel. I promised her I would protect her, that I would change. For her, I was willing to change, but, he lifted his head to look at me. That face, always so prideful and defiant, now looked unbearably fragile. But she's gone. Zhou Ziyun, why is it that I lost her, while you have a bright future ahead? Why? I didn't know why. I also didn't know what I should say. This wasn't my intention, and yet, Jiang Jin's beloved had died because of me. He sat across from me, all his sharp edges now gone, looking so vulnerable. He reminisced about his love, his eyes filled with despair and anguish. Zhou Ziyun, isn't this unfair? If anyone was at fault, it was me, so why was she the one who paid the price? So, why don't you go down and keep her company? Zhou Ziyun, Jiang Jin pulled a knife out of his pocket and walked toward me. The tip of the blade was only a few inches from my heart, but just then, someone kicked open the door. Both Jiang Jin and I looked toward the doorway. It was Zhou Wanning, and with her, Lu Jiyuan. Lu Jiyuan? Why was he here? Jiang Jin reacted quickly, immediately pressing the knife to my neck. You too. Get out. Or I'll kill her right now. Zhou Wanning tried to rush forward, but Lu Jiyuan held her back. For the first time, I saw a look of urgency on Lu Jiyuan's face. He looked at me and swallowed nervously. Jiang Jin, let's talk this through. The police are already on their way. Don't make this worse for yourself. Make this worse? So what? I could feel Jiang Jin's hand trembling. He was, after all, just an 18-year-old boy. But he didn't back down, nor did he show any regret. Zhou Wanning pointed a finger at him and shouted, "Are you out of your damn mind? If you're sick in the head, go get treatment. Don't act crazy here." Jiang Jin, I'm telling you, if you dare hurt Zhou Ziyun, I swear I won't let you off. Jiang Jin laughed softly in my ear. Look at this, Zhou Ziyun, you have so many people protecting you. But Qiu Yu, she only has me. The image of that night flashed through my mind again. It was a rainy night. I saw Jiang Jin emerge from an alley, his face covered in blood. Behind him was a man struggling to stand. I saw the glint of a silver knife in that man's hand. I actually had no real connection with Jiang Jin, but I didn't want to see anyone die in front of me, so I called out his name. That shout scared off the man holding the knife. Afterward, with lingering fear, I told Uncle Jiang, hoping he could protect his son. But I never expected that this incident would end up involving the death of another girl. Jiangjin, I'm sorry, I didn't know that my actions would lead to you losing someone you loved, but if I could go back, I would still do the same. I couldn't stand by and watch you die in front of me. Jiangjin's body stiffened for a moment. What do you mean, watch me die? I took a deep breath and told him everything I had seen that night. Jiangjin's breathing grew heavy. I don't believe you. You're just saying this to save yourself. There's no proof. If you don't believe me, you can check the security footage from the convenience store across the street that night. Jiangjin, I've never thought of you as beyond saving, and I have never been the flawless rich girl you see me as. Like you, I am just a pawn sacrificed for my family's interests, a puppet with no control over my own life. While Jiangjin was momentarily stunned, Zhou Wanning kicked him to the ground and immediately pulled me over to her. I looked on, shocked at everything unfolding, and realized for the first time that there was so much more to my little sister than I had known. Lu Jiyuan, why are you here? Zhou Wanning called me. I took a flight overnight to get here. Are you okay? He held my shoulders, his gaze intense as if he could see right through me. I shook my head. Outside, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Jiangjin got up from the ground and gave me one last look. I'll get to the bottom of this. Then he escaped through the window. I met the Zhou parents at the police station with Zhou Wanning. They looked as though they'd rushed over overnight, and the moment they saw me, their expressions darkened. Father stood before me, looking down with a disdainful sneer in his eyes. So, you've grown wings now, huh? Daring to run away from home? This is the consequence. Zhou Zhiyun, is this how we raised you? Come back with us. Mother sat beside me, holding my hand. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume. You see, even upon hearing that I'd been kidnapped, they still had the time to make themselves presentable, ensuring they didn't disgrace the Zhou family's reputation. These were my parents. First, they were the face of the Zhou family, and only after that, and after that again, were they my parents. Zhou Wanning pulled my hand away from Mother. She stood up, positioning herself between me and Father, unafraid of his authority. She's not going back with you. Neither of us is going back with you. Ridiculous. We should never have taken you back in the first place. Look at the way you've corrupted Zhiyun. Father's tone was full of displeasure and anger. In the past, if I had heard that tone from him, I'd probably be scrambling to apologize, but now, I felt nothing in my heart, just a faint sadness. I stood up, moving beside Zhou Wanning, and quietly looked at the man before me. Every little girl probably views her father as a hero at some point. I once did, too, a long, long time ago. Father was the omnipotent hero in my world, but later, I realized he was everyone's hero, everyone's but mine. Father, do you remember what happened when I was 6? He furrowed his brows, as though trying hard to recall, but I knew he wouldn't remember. I smiled, and as I smiled, my vision gradually grew blurry, my voice began to choke, but I forced myself to keep speaking. When I was 6, I was kidnapped. The kidnapper asked me to call you, but you said you were busy and told me not to bother you. Later, it was Lu Jiyuan who realized I was missing, who called the police, and who saved me. I saw you and Mother at the police station. Mother had come straight from the mahjong table. She hadn't even answered my call. Do you remember what you said to me? He took a step forward, as if wanting to hold my hand, but in the end, he stopped. You said that if I'd just stayed home and attended my tutoring class, if I hadn't gone to the park, I wouldn't have been kidnapped. I didn't understand back then. I didn't understand why. Even though I was your child, I lived like a puppet. Mother told me I needed to act like a proper young lady from a prestigious family, but no one ever told me I should live like Zhou Zhiyun. Zhiyun, Mother gripped my hand, her eyes filled with tears, as if she were desperately begging me not to leave. In this family, I wasn't allowed to cry, because winners don't cry, but I wasn't a winner. I was just an 18-year-old girl. Father, Mother, I'm 18 now, and I think I have the ability to take care of myself. The moment I said that, Father raised his eyebrows. You want to sever ties with the family? No. Zhiyun, you can't. How could you? I was already used to Mother's sharp refusals. She always rejected me like this. But this time, I wouldn't compromise. I held Zhou Wanning's hand, exchanged a glance with her, and nodded. Yes, I want to be myself again. In the end, Father agreed to my request. Of course, it wasn't because he reflected on his own faults. Rather, he believed that one day, I would beg him to let me come back, but clearly, he was mistaken. The moment I walked out of the police station with Zhou Wanning, I had never felt so relieved. Breathing in the air of freedom, looking at the open sky, I finally felt I could grow and live for myself. Ji, Lu Jiyuan was still waiting for me by the car. He called my name, and Zhou Wanning released my hand. I walked toward him, a bit hesitant. Lu Jiyuan, you're leaving, right? I nodded, not quite daring to meet his gaze. It was undeniable that the bond between Lu Jiyuan and me began with that absurd engagement, but later, what I fell in love with was his gentle and kind self. He always stayed by my side, protecting the hard-won little world I had carved out for myself. I certainly loved him, but what I loved even more was being my true self. A soft chuckle escaped Lu Jiyuan in the silence. He reached out to pat my head. Why aren't you happy? You can finally be yourself now, right, Ji? I've always supported you, so don't be afraid. Someday, I'll be in a position high enough to bring you back to my side. Lu Jiyuan's voice was gentle, yet carried an unshakable determination. As I lifted my head, his face loomed large in front of me, and he planted a light kiss on my forehead. Ji, go and fly. Zhou Wanning and I moved to this small town, leaving behind the stifling, extravagant social scene. The simplicity of high school life brought me peace, but on a rainy night, I encountered Jiang Jin. It was already the summer after the college entrance exams. He stood downstairs outside my house, without an umbrella, like a phantom. Jiang Jin. I called his name hesitantly, and Jiang Jin just stood there, looking at me, with strange dark stains on his clothes. Why are you here? He didn't answer. He just stood there, unmoving, watching me. I almost doubted if this was some doll that looked like Jiang Jin. Finally, at last, he opened his mouth, and his low voice reached my ears, mixed with the sound of rain. He said, "Thank you." The next day, the news reported that the chairman of the Jiang Corporation had met a tragic end at home. At the same time, a pair of men's sneakers was found by the nearby sea. I thought, Jiang Jin must have gone to see his girl. Zhou Wanning and I were admitted to the same school, a prestigious university in the country. All those days I'd spent cramming with Zhou Wanning had not gone to waste. On the first day of school, I received a bouquet of anonymous flowers, no name, but I knew it was from him. Young Master Lu had gone abroad. During the 4 years of university, every year on my birthday, I would receive a gift, until graduation day, when I saw Lu Jiyuan's face on TV. He had finally risen to the position of chairman. Then, step by step, he proceeded to acquire the Zhou Corporation. I turned around at the school gate, and saw the person I was most familiar with. He opened his arms toward me. 5 years later, Lu Jiyuan and I finally got married. On the day of the wedding, Zhou Wanning walked me down the aisle as my bridesmaid. She asked me if Lu Jiyuan was the brightest sunshine in my life. I looked at her profile and called her an idiot in my heart. It's you, my sister.